Member of Parliament for Couva, President of the Chamber and the many chambers that are here, distinguished guests. Let me first of all confess to you that, as you will notice, I have no notes in my hand because I got a call yesterday asking me if I would come and make an address today to the chamber or to the many chambers that are here as a group. I agreed to come here not knowing anything of what it was about. And I thought that it might be a good opportunity to have a conversation, to communicate to the stakeholders of Petrotrin, whom I happen to have the obligation at this stage to chair the board at. I see here a number of columnists in the press and also at the head table who have been doing a fair amount of writing about Petrotrin and other things. Let me therefore try to perhaps give a little bit of context and some of what we have identified and what we see as perhaps some of the solutions that need to be achieved. Let me put context first. I had worked with Stuart Young as a lawyer in getting TCL, getting control of the board of TCL, and we did a whole restructuring exercise. Subsequent to that, he came into Parliament and the government appointed a committee to look at restructuring Petrotrin. I was chosen on that committee, perhaps because of my knowing Stuart, but as we went along, on that committee you had a number of other people. You had two people from the OWTU, you had Robert Riley and Helen Drayton, so people who had been known to the society in general. One of the things that we came very quickly to understand as a group meeting there is that it was very difficult, near impossible for us to come up with solutions to Petrotrin, more so because we were doing it from the Ministry of Energy on the 20 whatever floor, 26th floor of the tower down at the waterfront. And you will appreciate that Petrotrin is a very complex and large organization, and to believe that many of us who had never been faced with any information on Petrotrin would come up with solutions to it, to me, certainly to many of us, it didn't make sense. What did come out of the entire program, however, is that there was a unified belief in that government had created an identity crisis in Petrotrin. Many of the people who presented to us as a committee had made a number of statements which demonstrated clearly the confusion that existed. Several of them thought that Petrotrin was there to carry out government policy, etc., etc., and to generate employment and various other things. Few of them saw Petrotrin as a company. In fact, none of them did. None of them saw it as a commercial company operating in an environment whereby they were producing commodities and had, therefore, to be competitive. In old days, we had protected our markets, and therefore the boundaries were clear. You had protection that allowed us to do things without the view that competitiveness directs most of what has happened. I've heard discussions about My own experience, and I could talk only from experience, my own experience is that somehow economics gets you at the end anyway. And I don't care what activity you're in, even if you're running a religion, economics are going to get you in the end anyway. If your revenue stream is less than your expenditure, you cannot survive. And that's a fact of life. Most of the times we have noticed in our discussions that people had come to believe that they could do developmental funding, that they could not have money and spend it, and so on and so on. So, fast forward to the new board being put in place, and I was put on the board and became the chairman of Petrotrin. Petrotrin is now in a situation where bad choices that were made in the past for the wrong reasons have created a stranglehold on the company because of bad capital expenditure choices. We have spent billions of dollars in capital projects that have not produced revenue, and the company's cost structure has become unwieldy, unacceptable. But it is a microcosm of the entire society. We have lost touch with the reality that our cost has to be that of other competitive environments if we are to survive. And we as a board are now faced with how do we get all of the stakeholders to understand, A, that Petrotrin is, if it is to survive, has to be a commercial entity operating in a commercial environment. The mandate that the current board had is to make Petrotrin a viable operation and to get it to be able to give dividends to the shareholders. In the past, dividends perhaps took a different route. It was not in the form of a dividend that one knows as paying out at the end of a fiscal period. And in fact, the dividends that one got might have been that they got their partners involved, or they got contracts, or they got various other things. So the board has been trying to wrap its mind around, first of all, we try to determine the assets of Petrotrin. What are the capabilities of the assets of Petrotrin? So we brought in certain help to help us in determining the assets of Petrotrin, what are the capabilities of it. Having had some report on that, we then decided, looking at it, that, and I'm going to be very frank and open, looking at it, there are certain assets in Petrotrin that we question the viability of whether or not they will ever be able to be made viable. We therefore are in the process of trying to design purpose-built organizations that will be structured specifically around the productive activities of Petrotrin. Petrotrin over the years created a superstructure of services that are absolutely unnecessary and cannot be retained in today's enterprise. We have got to now change back Petrotrin into one whereby they are generating wealth. To do that, naturally, the obvious thing that everybody has been talking about is the cost of our manpower. Manpower costs in Petrotrin are extraordinarily high for sure. But manpower are not the only costs that are high in Petrotrin. We have also been having conversations with all of our stakeholders. Among them, we have been having conversations with our suppliers. Some of you may be part of that group. And we have been looking at ways and means whereby Petrotrin could become more competitive. It is not something that is going to happen in a short period of time. The question as we go through all of these exercises is how much patience do we have in getting it done, how much commitment we have in getting it done. And naturally, we talk of the most vocal group in the union, but we also have, as you know, we have the major stakeholders in the government, and the government has had, like the union, a history of operating in an environment where they have had a big say in Petrotrin. We are trying to discourage that practice and to let Petrotrin operate on the basis of let Petrotrin operate on the basis of being a company that the board of directors will exercise the necessary disciplines in the company, and they will determine the direction in which it goes. This is a dilemma that I think Ralph Maranch just talked about. It is something that I personally have been making public statements against. The fact that the state has become too all-encroaching in a lot of activities, and it has crowded out a lot of people. We now have got to find some way where that is something that we can ring-fence and discourage. The fact that Petrotrin continues to be in the forefront is primarily, it's a large company. It is between 20 and $30 billion in revenue. There is very little margin that it operates because it imports a large part of what it is using. It is also, I question whether or not, we are really a contributor to foreign exchange, because in fact what happens is that we import a lot of what we refine. The production of local product for the refinery is 40,000 barrels as against a total refinery output of 175,000. So that gives you the disparity, shows you how much has to be imported. Some of the things that I think that may be useful for the population here to be understanding of is that we came into, as a board, came in to the boardroom in the hope that we could make a contribution in changing this. But changing Petrotrin today is going to be a very fragile exercise unless we get a commitment from all parties to try and keep it independent of interference. Interference has been the single most destructive part of the process in this. And that interference, a similar situation went on with the airline that we had in Trinidad and Tobago. We still have. We took a lot of trouble in trying to reorganize that airline. We did make it into a slim, built-for-purpose organization, only to come and have a change of government and have a change of people that came into it and a change of direction. So there is a very big need for us to get total commitment in anything that we're doing in these enterprises, so that there is not that kind of destruction that follows any attempt to get it done. I only try to ask everybody to temper their expectations, because Petrotrin is a lot bigger than you will believe as a problem, and it is taking huge amounts of commitment to keep trying to get it going. We are hopeful, we are doing a lot of work. There is some sign that there can be some better arrangement than exists now. There are areas where we think that perhaps the discontinuation of certain things might be the best option. And I know that sometimes frightens people, but then I drive from Port of Spain to San Fernando, and on my way up, I pass through the central areas, and as a young man, I used to remember traveling there when it was a cane industry. And I want to tell you that perhaps the best thing that happened to that central area was that we got rid of cane, because the dependency that we had on it locked us in to that kind of thinking. And hopefully we understand that Petrotrin has to be a much slimmer thing, but it is operating in an environment where oil is not going to last forever. And the only way that Petrotrin is going to operate, if it is going to stay as a refinery, is if that is going to be a competitive environment. And to be competitive, it means that all the people who are stakeholders in Petrotrin have to want it to be competitive. That is a commitment you have to make to it. It's not going to be, the directors can't do it alone. They can help in directing it, but every stakeholder has to be part of making Petrotrin competitive. Thank you very much.